When your parliamentary colleague in Westminster, Jess Phillips, talked about the language that Prime Minister Johnson used last night in the chamber and said that it was language designed to cause hatred when he used words like betrayal and surrender, do you think Jess Phillips was right?
Not only is she making a fair point, but I think it's also a deliberate strategy by the Prime Minister, because here we all are now talking about whether it's appropriate to describe the bill in that way, rather than looking at what the bill actually does. And far from being a surrender bill, it's actually a protection of Britain bill, because a no-deal Brexit from the European Union would be catastrophic for Britain. And that is what the Prime Minister wants to avoid discussion of, the actual practical consequences of a no-deal Brexit. And in a way, he's succeeded, hasn't he? We're all discussing the language that he's using.
But it's an odd thing, Richard, isn't it? Because 498 MPs, including many of those who are now accusing the Prime Minister of potentially damaging the country, which led to them voting for Hilary Benn's bill, are the same people who voted for Article 50, which said very clearly that we'd leave on the 29th of March with or without a deal. Isn't there an element of hypocrisy here?
No, because Article 50, I'm sure you've read the article, Nigel, says that there is a 2-year period to negotiate a withdrawal agreement. And in the interests of Britain, if we go ahead with Brexit, we would want it to be a good withdrawal agreement that benefits Britain, if possible, or at least does the least damage to Britain. And if you've not managed to do that, then you can, by agreement, extend that period if necessary.
But it also says,
and that's what Article 50 actually says.
Yeah, and it says, if we fail to have an agreement, we just leave. All right, let me try
unless it's extended, which it
has been.
Permits. And that's what we've done, and that's a quite legitimate and perfectly reasonable thing to do if you've not got a deal and you want to avoid. We did have a deal, we rejected it, and because we don't want a bad deal and you don't want to leave without a deal, then the logical thing is to extend.
Now, as I say, they voted for it, and the country was told again and again and again we were leaving on that date. We didn't. But it's interesting that Jess Phillips talks about this. Jess Phillips talks about this.
The country was told, Nigel, that the country was told 3 years ago that Brexit would be easy. It's turning out to be rather complicated. That it would save lots of money that would all go to the NHS. It's turning out to cost a fortune. We were told it would be good for the economy, and
it will be.
It will be rather the opposite.
I think it's going to be, Richard. I think it's going to be great, but we have different points of view, and you and I can argue that. You and I can argue that, and you can think you're right, and I can think you're right, but this debate is about the way people like you and I speak to each other. You see, I mean, it just strikes me as being a bit rich that, Jess Phillips herself said publicly, I will knife Corbyn in the front, not the back. John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor, extraordinarily at a rally, said, lynch the bitch.
He was quoting somebody else that said that.
But still he said it.
Those weren't his words. He was.
Why use them? Why use them?
You just used those words, disagreeing with them. So I'm sure
I do.
I'm not going to now come back and say, Nigel, you used those words.
Yes, the trouble is McDonnell didn't use them in negative.
When you're quoting them, and they weren't his words when he's quoting somebody else.
And extraordinarily, David Lammy, I mean, this is extraordinary. And this was a big rally, a big People's Vote rally in London. And he was talking about Jacob Rees-Mogg and the Prime Minister. He said calling them Nazis is not strong enough. Let's just listen for a moment, Richard, to David Lammy being interviewed on this point by Andrew Marr.
Comparing the ERG to the Nazi party, or at least to the South African racists. Now, whatever you think about the ERG, that was an unacceptable comparison, wasn't it?
Andrew, I would say that wasn't strong enough.
That's pretty extraordinary. I mean, Richard, what I'm saying here is this, that we have abuse thrown at leavers. I could lump myself in with this, but for the minute I won't. Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Prime Minister, Labour MPs repeatedly calling them liars, and now David Lammy comparing them to Nazis. Isn't it hypocritical to criticise a Prime Minister for using words like surrender and betrayal when much worse has been repeatedly used against him?
I don't think in the chamber of the House of Commons, which has a tradition, in fact, a rule book that actually prohibits use of swear words, abusive language, etc. In that context, it's especially bad. It's not good in general, I absolutely agree with you, but it's especially bad in the House of Commons, and for the Prime Minister, no less, to start using language that is deliberately chosen, probably premeditated as well in advance, as a strategy, as part of his political strategy. That's the qualitative difference. And look, he's succeeded, hasn't he? Because we're all discussing the words he's using and his choice of language, instead of discussing the real threats to Britain of a no-deal Brexit, the damage that would cause to our country.